Jenny woke up in a white fluffy chair. This was, she felt, an unexpected development. For several long moments she simply sat there blinking her eyes. The lighting was extremely bright, not warm or comforting, just aggressively bright, like someone had turned the concept of daylight up too far. The room itself looked like a government office designed by someone who had once heard a vague description of heaven and then filled in the rest with guesswork. There were clouds, but they were arranged in neat rows, like waiting room chairs. In front of her was a very large old wooden desk. Behind it sat a man wearing small spectacles, leafing through a very large book with the slow, deliberate care of someone who had been doing exactly this for a very long time. A sign hovered nearby. "Welcome to the afterlife. Please take a number." Jenny looked down. She was holding a small ticket, 42. "Well," she said slowly, "that's unusual." The man behind the desk looked up. "Ah," he said, "Jennifer Barker. Excellent. Right on schedule." Jenny blinked. "How am I on schedule? I just drowned." "Yes," the man replied kindly. "That's generally how it works." He checked the book again. "Very brave, by the way, jumping into freezing water to save someone you barely knew. Quite admirable." Jenny frowned. "So am I dead?" "Yes." "Oh." She considered this. "Right then," the man said. He closed the book with a soft thud. "And congratulations," he added. Jenny frowned again. "For what?" The man slid a thin pamphlet across the desk. On the front were the words, "So You're Dead, a helpful guide to the afterlife. Orientation begins soon. Wings will be issued shortly." Jenny stared at it, then back at him. "Wings?" "Yes," he said, already looking back down at his book. "Wings. And a halo. Standard issue." Jenny blinked again. "Why am I being congratulated?" The man paused, sighed faintly, and peered at her over the rim of his glasses, as though she were interrupting something considerably more important than her own death. "Because," he said, "according to my memo, you have been selected and assigned to the role of guardian angel." He turned a page. "Not something I'd personally recommend," he added without looking up, "but congratulations all the same." Jenny stared at him. He continued reading. "And that," he said absently, "is why you will be issued with wings. Fitting will happen shortly. Please sit patiently. We are somewhat overworked today." He gestured vaguely to the room. Jenny looked around. There were at least 6 people sitting quietly on identical clouds, all holding tickets. No one seemed to be moving. So Jenny sat, patiently, quietly. 3 years later, someone called her name. "Jennifer Barker?" Jenny opened her eyes. She stretched, rubbed at them, and brushed what felt suspiciously like dust from her sleeve. A woman stood in the doorway, crisp white robes, perfect posture, clipboard tucked neatly under one arm. Her expression sharp enough to cut through cloud. "I'm Margaret," she said, "your trainer. Come along, we're already behind." Jenny blinked. "Behind what?" Margaret turned on her heel. "Everything." Jenny followed as instructed. Jenny learned 3 important things during her first week in heaven. First, the clouds were real. Second, the coffee was terrible. And third, angels had jobs. Her orientation instructor, or trainer, as Margaret insisted on calling herself, was the same woman who had collected her from the waiting room. Margaret moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had long ago decided that time, even in eternity, should not be wasted on unnecessary conversation. Guardian angels, Margaret explained, without looking up from her clipboard, are responsible for guiding humans through their lives. This includes, but is not limited to, minor interventions, intuitive nudges, and the prevention of catastrophically poor decision-making. Jenny raised her hand. Margaret paused. Yes? Do humans listen? Margaret offered a small, polite smile. Rarely. Jenny considered this. That seems inefficient. Yes, Margaret agreed, already moving on. The next step was equipment. Margaret handed her a list. Standard issue, she said. Jenny read 1 pair of wings, 1 halo, 1 clipboard. Jenny looked up. Do I really need the clipboard? Margaret met her gaze. Yes. The wings were, problematic, shall we say. They were slightly too large for a start. When Jenny tried to stand, they knocked over a small stack of forms, clipped a passing angel, and lodged briefly in a doorway. Stand still, Margaret said. I am standing still, Jenny replied, as one wing slowly tipped a nearby chair onto its side. Margaret made a note on her clipboard. Adjustment request, she said. Estimated processing time? Indefinite. Flying lessons were worse. Flying, Margaret explained, is simply a matter of balance, intention, and control. Jenny nodded, then immediately flew into a wall. By the 3rd attempt, she had managed to remain airborne for nearly 4 seconds. On the 4th, she spun gently in place before drifting backwards into a filing cabinet. On the 5th, she hovered successfully, just briefly, before her halo slipped down over one eye. Why does it do that? Jenny demanded, pushing it back into place. Improper alignment, Margaret said calmly. It's a floating ring, Jenny said. Yes, Margaret replied. It shouldn't bounce, gasped Jenny. Margaret watched as the halo bobbed slightly, then tilted again. Noted, she said, making another mark on her clipboard. Jenny narrowed her eyes. Are you laughing at me? Margaret didn't look up. Of course not. Not officially. Despite everything, Jenny noticed something unsettling. Margaret never raised her voice, never lost patience, never broke the rules, but occasionally, very occasionally, there was the faintest flicker of something behind her expression. Not quite amusement, but close enough to be suspicious. By the end of the week, Jenny could stay in the air for a reasonable amount of time, keep her halo mostly in place, and hold a clipboard without actively resenting it. Though this last one remained a work in progress. On her final day of training, Margaret stopped and turned to her. You'll begin assignments tomorrow, she said. Jenny froze. Tomorrow? Yes. Jenny gestured vaguely. I've only been here a week. Margaret tilted her head slightly. You've been here for 3 years. Jenny stared at her. What? Margaret checked her clipboard. Orientation delays, she said. Quite normal. Jenny looked back towards the waiting room. 3 years. Yes. Jenny paused, then nodded slowly. Right, she said. I already hate it.